Hello everyone, welcome back to another Greek Gift Chess video. I'm Alex,
And I'm Phil.
and today we're going to be talking about the King's Indian defense. King's Indian defense is a dynamic defense for the black pieces against d4, and this video is going to be the first of a 5-part series of attacking chess openings. You guys can refer back to our first video in the series that introduced you guys to all the openings, and well, let's get straight to it. So the King's Indian defense arises after d4, and black is going to play knight f6. Now, white takes more center space, controls the d5 square with c4, and here we're going to play d6.
So d6 is important because it prepares our two most important pawn breaks in this position, which are e5 and c5. They're going to break against white's overextended center. But this move also kind of blocks in our dark square bishop, so instead of the more traditional developing it to the queen side, we're going to be fianchettoing.
Exactly. So the bishop is going to be really well placed on the king side, and it's going to be striking at white's center. So after knight c3, more development in g6, we're going to try and put the bishop on e7, on g7. And here, white's main move is e4. This move is very natural. It just grabs as much center space as possible because black is playing a hyper-modern opening, is not trying to gain space in the center. However, white can also play e3. This is a move that you're going to see probably lower-rated players play, or people who aren't as comfortable with the King's Indian, and we want you guys to know a cool trap that you can play against it. So for example, after bishop g7, normal development might look something like knight f3, castles, and bishop d3. And now after rook e8, we're going to go for e5 pawn break, like we said. Let's say castles in e5. Here, white needs to be really careful because we have a sneaky trap. So after queen e2, we get a quick fork on the board, and the position's already winning. Notice, even in this position, if white plays a correct move like bishop c2 or bishop e2, the position is pleasant for black because we're going to get quick development and strike against white's center. Instead, we're going to be focusing our time on e4. So after e4, bishop g7, the main move is knight f3. With knight f3, we're going to get castled quickly. And so you notice, for the moment, we're leaving the center intact, and we're just getting development. So white only has 2 pieces developed, we have 3. Development is going to be a key idea in the King's Indian defense. Sometimes we're even going to sacrifice pawns for it. So after bishop e2, immediately we play e5. Now this might look like a blunder, because after takes, it looks like white can take on e5.
But actually, we trade queens here, and then take that pawn right there on e4, and after white captures, we actually get the knight back, and this is a very pleasant position because we get quick development. All of white's pieces are on the back rank, which is never a good thing. And we just get out and control those open files in the center with our rooks.
Exactly. So here the material is equal, but black has a development advantage, and it's going to be a really pleasant endgame for you guys to play. Instead, the main line, the exchange King's Indian is actually playable, but white should not take on e5 here because of what Phil just covered. Instead, white should try and trade queens. So after takes and takes, white has the tricky move bishop g5. Here, you can't be too relaxed. You can't just go for h6 because
it's important to play rook e8
instead. And so the problem is if you go for h6, white will take, and then play knight d5. And here we're actually losing a pawn because of this fork. Your position's basically in ruins, and we really don't want this to happen. So instead, play rook e8. And after knight d5, we can just trade on d5 and play c6. Here, again, we're going for our usual ideas. Break against center. White is forced to take, otherwise this pawn will be isolated, and our e4 pawn will become mobile if we take on d5. And so after takes, we have a really nice development, and our bishop just going to come out, rook's going to come in. It's going to be a good position for you guys. So instead, after knight c6, white tends not to take on e5, and instead play d5. Here we'll get knight e7 and b4. Notice white is going for this attack on the queen side with c4, b4, and a4, and trying to crack down against our underdeveloped queen side. This rook is not connected with the other rook, and that's going to be a thing that white's targeting. However, we're going to get this key move in knight e8.
And can I just say, this is the core position of the King's Indian. This is really why we chose this, and this is going to get you those aggressive attacking games. So we drop the knight back to e8, and the idea of this is to prepare f5. And f5 is going to be a crucial instigator of that massive kingside attack that we always see in King's Indian games. You can also see this idea in our earlier Kalashnikov video if you'd be interested in that.
Exactly. So in this position, you're going to want to undevelop your knight with the idea of f5, and don't forget to redevelop it afterwards. We don't want to keep the knight on e8, but it's important to go for f5. If you don't, Black here really has no other pawn breaks. c6 is not going to accomplish much, and neither is a5. And so it's really the only source of counterplay. Remember, in the King's Indian, we're giving up the center, but we can't just let white sit on it. Just like keep his space advantage and not break against it. You need to get this pawn break in with f5. So after knight e8 and c5, we're going to immediately play f5. And now white should play knight d2. The idea is that white wants us to take on e4 and then take back with a knight. This knight would be on what's called an outpost square. And really our attack is over because this rook is never going to be enough to get through on the f-file, and this bishop is actually going to be stuck behind our own pawns. Instead, what we do want to happen, let's say after a position like a4 and knight f6, we want white to take us on f5. And the crucial idea, please do not forget this, is to take with the g-pawn. Exactly, Phil.
If you take with a piece, it may look nicer or more aesthetic because you're developing, but you'd be missing out on this idea of king h8, rook g8 to get the attack started.
Exactly. So not only do we have this idea, but now our center pawns are mobile. You're going to have moves like e4 in some positions to open up your bishop, and even more importantly, the pawn on f5 controls the square on e4 and doesn't let white get that outpost square. So that's the reason why white tends to play knight d2 here. He wants to be able to retake on e4 with a knight. After knight f6 and f3, f4, we're going to lock it down and go for a later pawn break. Knight c4, g5, continuing the attack on the queen side, and let's say white plays something like a4, knight g6. This is where we're going to stop. You guys feel free to look into the position more. It's super rich position with plenty of ideas. One cool game is the Hikaru Nakamura game, which I'm sure you've all seen, where he sacrifices his queen a few times and mates on the g2 square. So yeah, look into this position, but this is the crucial position. You're going to be looking for g4, for h4, for h3. Just go for that kingside attack, and maybe even sack the bishop on h3.
That would be fun. Another key note that I'd like to make is that bishop on the light squares can be a killer in these kinds of variations. So you might want to keep it there on c8 for just a while, and when it comes out, it's really going to signal the climax of the attack.
Exactly. Phil's right. This bishop really has no better square at the moment. On d7 it's not really doing much, and it can't go anywhere else. So you want to keep it as a disposable piece to sack on h3 often, and use it to just get the attack through. So we're going to rewind all the way back to the fourth move, where white played knight f3. Instead, white can play moves like bishop e2. So after this, we're going to castle anyways, and let's say white is just intent on developing the bishops. We're going to go for c5. Now, white can take on c5, and Phil's going to show you guys what happens afterwards.
D takes c5, and after queen takes d8, rook takes d8, this endgame is actually pretty nice and comfortable for black because the d4 square is exploitable, but if white tries to take over our own d5 square, which is kind of a similar weakness, it's not actually a weakness because we can push them out with e6.
Exactly. So we have an outpost square, they do not. Don't forget your outpost squares in the King's Indian. So after d5, instead of taking on c5, white's best move is to play d5. And so after d5, this is a key idea you're going to want to know in the King's Indian, e6. We need to break against white's center, like I said before. We can't just let white have the center with no compensation. After queen d2, we take, and rook e8. Knight f3, key idea is going to be to develop this bishop now to g4 and knight to d7.
And so in these kinds of positions, oftentimes we even want to take on f3 because it gives us the e5 square for our knight. And even though you're giving away the second bishop and the bishop pair for a knight, you're actually getting some pretty nice piece activity in return.
Exactly. So instead of bishop e2, on the fifth move, white can also play the four pawns attack with f4. This might look scary, but we're going to show you guys exactly what to do. Here you want to play c5, attack white's center, and you see how the bishop and the pawn are going to be coordinating on this d4 square. This causes white to play d5. We can just castle, knight f3, and now go for the same idea that we just saw, e6. We need to break against the center. So after bishop e2, we can take and take. Now, the play is super simple. Rook e8, and already this e4 pawn seems to be dropping. As there's plenty of moves that white can play here, but I just want to show you guys a sample variation where white maybe gets a bit overzealous and plays e5. Now we can just take, knight g4, and this knight's going to be coming back a hero to win the pawn on e5, and we're going to be up a pawn in a pleasant middle game. Finally, we're going to cover the Zamish variation with f3. This position is especially annoying for King's Indian players, and so after castles, bishop e3, it seems as if c5 does not work because white can just take, trade the queens, and then win a pawn. However, this is exactly the position we're going for. Because we're going to go for knight c6, and let's say white retreats his overextended bishop. We play bishop e6. We're playing against this weak pawn on c4. You might think the pawn is not actually weak because it moves like b3, but we're going to have tactics like knight e4, exploiting the undefended pawn, the undefended knight, and the rook in the corner. So let's say, for example, white plays knight g to e2 in this position.
Just a casual developing move. But actually, we have a pretty savage move to punish white's nonchalant play here, which is knight b4. Here we're threatening two things, and they can't both be stopped, which are knight d3 and knight c2, as we have on the board here. And one's a fork, the other one is just positionally crushing. All the pieces are going to come out here, and so white's play is all lost, basically.
Yes, the computer already says black is winning in this position. So these are the types of ideas that we're going to go for in the King's Indian defense. We hope you guys learned a lot from this video, and we're going to be making more of these videos in the future, so please leave comments,
subscribe,
and tell us what you think we can improve on or what we should do next. Signing off, this is Alex.
And Phil.
And we'll see you in the next one.